Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we're going to be doing an educational follow-up to Jenny Lee's Survivor story. It was a re-release Survivor story, and we're going to be doing follow-ups for them now. And today I'm going to break down the core themes of Jenna Lee's story. I want to talk about how the mirroring worked here, the future faking worked here, and how trust got built really quickly and how control grew from all of that. And then we'll get into the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame that started shaping how Jenna Lee moved inside the relationship. And before we get to that, if you want to be a guest like Jenny Lee was on our Survivor Story episodes, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form button at the top of the page, fill out our guest form, and press the submit button. And also, we have a support group at our website, narcissistapocalypse.com. And inside, you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. So join our support group today. And also at our website, you can join our newsletter. Our newsletter is free, and you also get a free workbook for our Survivor Story episodes. And it is a very informative newsletter, very reflective newsletter. So join that today at narcissistapocalypse.com. And to give context for people that did not hear Jenna Lee's Survivor story, so anyone who didn't listen to this Survivor story yet, Jenna Lee met a firefighter on a dating app. And early on, this person is being very open. He's quickly talking about his past, everything that he's been through, what he wants, and what he is looking for. And it is really all lining up with what Jenna Lee is looking for. He's talking about the future. He's talking about stuff that is serious. He's talking about building something. And it doesn't take long before this relationship starts to feel like it is going somewhere. You know, they're talking about marriage. They're talking about kids. They're talking about what life would look like together. And it's creating momentum. But at the same time, there are things that aren't really sitting right with Jenna Lee while this is going on. The pace here is very fast. The energy is a lot. You know, some moments feel like too much too soon is going on, and she's noticing all of that. He's using this empathy about what he's been through, crazy exes, you know, the stuff with his childhood to get this empathy. So she sees him as this victim. Things are really moving fast. There's a lot of love bombing that is going on here, a lot of trust building that is going on here when he gives her a key to the house. And he's really laying this foundation here, which is very difficult for Jenna Lee to listen to her instinct, because she was telling herself during this time, this seems off. But all of this stuff combined with excessive love bombing and trust building, big gestures, is overwhelming her senses and overwhelming that voice in her head. And this relationship just continues and continues. And this person at a certain point starts to take control, and it becomes isolating. So that's the gist of Jenna Lee's story. The beginning to me is the really big hook here. And we're going to start off here with some of these big themes. You know, mirroring here is a big theme in her story. This abuser is learning that Jenna Lee wants something serious. He's learning that the family matters to her. He's learning that the future matters to her. He learns that trust matters to her. He learns her hopes. He learns her fears. He starts talking directly to those places. So when she starts feeling connected to him, it's not just because she likes him. It's because he's making himself feel really emotionally familiar, because he's making himself feel like an answer to everything that she was looking for. And this is why this mirroring here is working. So this is really recognizing a part of her, like this person is a missing piece. And it's a big key to how this person, this abuser, started to gain a course of control over Jenna Lee. And then up next here, a big takeaway, a big theme is the future faking. So as Jenna Lee said in her story, you know, she wanted kids, she wanted the family. You know, there was a pressure at this point because she's 30 to 32 years old already while this is happening. So once this person starts mentioning marriage, once this person starts mentioning kids, building a life together, So the relationship at this point starts to really take a serious tone here very early on with this future faking. And it's not just you're kind of getting to know the person at this point with Jenna Lee. Early on here, it starts to feel like this relationship is something important. The future faking here is making it feel very meaningful. So once this really starts to feel important, Jenna Lee and others who have gone through this start to feel differently inside. So you become more patient. You become more willing to work through discomfort. And you're more likely to question yourself instead of the relationship. And this is a huge part of the story because Jenna Lee is not just reacting to the person in front of her. She's also now looking at this relationship as what it represents and what it represents to her. When things start to feel off, there's this future faking, this thing that she's attached herself to, that this person has manipulated her into thinking is reality. And, it can keep her in this relationship longer. You're looking at that thing down the road you always wanted, so you might start toughing it out just because, okay, I think we can get there. I think I can, move through this. I think this is okay. That's the big thing here with the future faking and in Jenna Lee's story. So also a big thing in Jenna Lee's story is how the trust here is built. And, besides the future faking, besides the mirroring, trust becomes a big thing in this story. And when you think about what healthy trust is, it's built over a long period of time. It's not something that happens quickly. You have like all of these things on a track record. Okay, this person is trustworthy. And you never know, but still, for safety reasons, long period of time, consistency over a long period of time is healthy. But with Jenna Lee's story, the trust got built really quickly, and it was through intensity, vulnerability, really big symbolic gestures. And here in Jenna Lee's story, there was a moment where this person gave her the key to her home, this big trust building moment, giving her that key. The love language book that he gave her to read, that's also like a big thing. The repeated statements about how important she is to him matter here. He's creating this trust, what you are to me, how he's valuing you. He's giving you these things to read, his innermost world, his house. It's all yours, accessible to you. There's no boundaries on it because I trust you, so therefore you should trust me. So once all of these things start to happen, it's creating not just closeness or perceived closeness, it's creating this evidence of it. This relationship starts to feel pretty established. And for Jenna Lee and others who have gone through this specific type of abuse, it's already feeling like something that is very real. And once it becomes very real, it's hard to hold on to doubt because you have all of these actual physical things, like not just the words, the key, the book, all those things have gone into this that like, okay, there's these physical evidence of trust here. So when someone says she ignored her gut, in reality, she did not ignore her gut. Her gut was right. And she talked about, that she had gut feelings that something was going on, but this is very overwhelming. Stuff like this is overwhelming her senses. It's going quickly. It's intense. That intensity is overriding the other feelings that are going on. She did feel these things. She did notice these things. She did register this was fast, this was intense. But every time those feelings came up, there was something else to complicate those things. So it was either reassurance, future talk, a lot of these closeness type things that were going on. This person's certainty about like who she was to him, and just all this momentum is overriding that gut feeling. And that's what this abuser did really well in Jenna Lee's story. And that gets us to the overwhelm. And the lack of space in this story becomes a big thing. And the intensity here is really reducing her ability to process everything that she is feeling. The relationship is moving quickly. The emotional stuff going on in this relationship is heavy. It's exciting, flattery. They're validating you, and this can just override all of your senses. And it doesn't really give her room for her own feelings here, because this person is just doing wave after wave after wave of thing to override space for her own feelings to even settle, to even understand them and work through them. So when someone is always moving the relationship forward and defining it, always adding meaning to it and reassuring it, like what happened here with Jenna, always explaining, always pulling it toward the future. So a big thing here is that the overwhelm is one of the reasons why trust is forming over clarity. It's doing it before clarity, because if clarity came before, this might be out the door. This relationship might not continue. But this trust building is being done before clarity happens, and it's overwhelming the clarity part of everything. So it gets you to the point where the control will eventually begin. So those are the big takeaways from this episode, the bigger themes. And now we're going to get into the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Jenna Lee's story. So the fear in Jenna Lee's story doesn't start at the beginning, because at the beginning she's given a lot of reasons to trust him. So the biggest fear moment with her family that matters most. Her mother is excited, taking photos, doing something very harmless, and suddenly he's in the truck with a look in his eyes and making it clear that this is now a problem, and if she doesn't do anything to handle it, like, he will. So this is the big fear in her story, in Jenna Lee's story. She begins to feel, she's not necessarily terrified of this person. It then starts to become, I don't know when this person is going to shift. I don't know what version of him I'm going to get. I don't know what is going to become a problem anymore. And when someone becomes unpredictable like that, the fear in this instance starts to look like caution. So you start watching the room more. You start paying attention to tone more. You start getting more careful about things, what you're going to do wrong. You don't know what a family member is going to do wrong. You don't know what is going to set this person off. And that creates a form of control. It starts to make you conform to trying to predict what the other person is doing and tend to that person's emotional needs. And the fear kept her in this relationship longer, because once he started showing that he could turn quickly, she was no longer just dealing with what he said, but with the unpredictability of who he might become. The fear in this relationship for Jenna Lee is really trying to manage the emotional atmosphere of what is actually going on and asking whether this relationship is feeling safe. So she's constantly trying to feel safe, and that is creating a form of control to really placate her abuser's needs. So for obligation gets built really early on in Jenna Lee's story, and it gets built through the seriousness of this relationship. He's not just presenting this relationship like anything casual. He's not acting like it's just two people seeing where it goes. He's really giving weight to this relationship pretty immediately. He's talking about marriage. He's talking about kids. He's talking about the future that they're going to have. He gives her a key to the house. Gives her the wrapped up book as if the relationship is already something they both need to work on and deepen it and protect it. And this is really creating an obligation to this relationship. Jenna Lee right here isn't just dating anyone. She's really dating something that's being framed as being very meaningful. So with this type of framing that's going on and this type of obligation, the question in Jenna's mind is not, do I like what is happening? Now it becomes, am I giving this relationship a fair chance because of the seriousness of everything? And now it's like an obligation to this relationship. She's trying to be fair. She's trying to be open. She's not trying to be the person that ruins something by pulling away too early. She's just trying to understand him. She's trying to keep up with a relationship that has already been made to feel very important. And this is where the obligation really becomes powerful. Obligation kept her in this relationship longer because he framed it as being so serious, headed somewhere. And now this obligation is here in a form of control. And up next, we have guilt. And guilt is everywhere in this story. And her abuser has a difficult past. He has pain. He has family issues. He tells stories that position him as someone who's been hurt, misunderstood. He's been wronged. He's the black sheep. He talks about the ex who was awful to him. He's really presenting himself as the victim here to Jenna Lee. So in future situations, she'll feel guilt for him. Am I being too hard on him? Am I not understanding what he's been through? Am I being unfair to someone who's had a hard life? So the guilt really starts to get in there, and this can bottle up there with obligation. She's given the key. She's given the "I love you" talk. There's things that have been given to her. The book and working on things, the meaning of all of those things. So this person is taking it so seriously that if she doesn't do that, there's guilt because this person feels this way. So she might feel guilty that she has to feel that way too, instead of letting it take time to get there and not rush it. So the guilt is really deepening. And then once her family gets involved here, because there's a story with the family and she kind of has to choose, like, who do I protect, my family or this person? So guilt gets involved here as well, having to take this person's side, continue the relationship. It becomes very isolating as well when it comes to her family in this situation. So guilt really kept her in this relationship for much longer because he'd given just so many reasons to feel guilty for him. His pain stories, just the way he positioned himself throughout this whole entire relationship, and has used it to control, what he's been able to get away with, and it keeps her in the relationship longer. So up next is shame. And the biggest part of shame in this story, in Jenna Lee's story, is there's a kind of shame that is trying to hold both of these realities together. The good person from the beginning, and then the second person who is the abuser in the middle of her story, in the middle of her relationship. So she's trying to reconcile both of those versions. And once that happens, you might start distrusting yourself because you don't know what's going on. And she was a perfectionist in how she thought about things and how she thought about herself. So then shaming yourself can start to happen. And once you start shaming yourself for distrusting your own self because of trying to reconcile these things, it starts to erode this place inside you that knows what you know. The certainty of what you know is gone. So a big thing here is ending this relationship, or this relationship continuing. She's at odds with her own self and her own perception of things. So the shame really kept her in this relationship longer, because the more confusing it became, the more that confusion really just started to turn inward, especially for someone like Jenna Lee, who saw herself as being competent, independent, and strong. So instead of only asking what was wrong with him or the relationship, shame made her ask what was wrong with her for being in it and for going along with it for so long, or for not being able to end it sooner. So as a whole here, the fear was the fear he could turn at any time. The obligation was the relationship has already been made to feel serious. The guilt here, feeling guilty for him and all the things that were created in this relationship. And then there's the shame, and the shame is the whole thing is starting to make her question herself. And all those things combined starts to create this course of control that keeps her in this relationship longer. So that is the fear, obligation, and guilt for Jenna Lee's story. And for Jenna Lee going forward, our big goal is that we want to let her future relationships unfold at a pace where she can actually hear herself think, to recognize the difference between intensity and compatibility, and to stay connected to her own timing, not someone else's urgency, and just to continue rebuilding trust in her own perception. And I just really wanted to thank Jenna Lee once again for being our guest so long ago on our show. And if you want to be a guest on our Survivor Story episodes, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, and you'll see that we have a guest form button at the top of the page. Fill out our guest form, press the submit button. Also at our website, we have a support group that you can join with Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we also have a free newsletter at our website as well that you can sign up to. And that is it for this follow-up episode. And I hope you have a good night.